From the case files of God's Gumshoe. Case 607. Codename Taylor.
Dear God's Gumshoe, can you please tell me how did we get into this state of affairs where one religious group are flying airplanes into buildings while another group are bombing a civilization back to the Stone Age, and all the while science is telling us that all religious thinking is just fantasy and fairy tales, and that there is no hope of any kind of life experience after we die, and that all this is just a cosmic accident? What is the big truth in all this? Thank you. Taylor.
Thank you, Taylor. Taylor, this is a very interesting case. I have sent off a few telegrams and a few special inquiries. Watson is out right now retrieving them. Upon his return, I believe we will have your answer. It's all really quite elementary. Today, many talk about the clash of civilizations, but I think what is really going on and what this is really about is the clash of ideologies. Ideologies that carry the flag of religion, but really have very little to do with what is called true religion, true spiritual principles. As far as the clash between religion and science is concerned, there's always been this debate. But most true scientists and most true theists see that both sides of this debate are really just different sides of the same coin, the coin of truth. And both science and religion are looking for that big T truth, just as you are, using different models of investigation. Science uses the method of experiment, the scientific method. Religionists rely on the personal spiritual experience that the theist or the religionist has, but both are the search for truth. Here are the facts of the case, and you can judge for yourself. So let's just imagine for a minute that upon Watson's return, we have the whole truth. So let us call this the future truth. And now, let's put it aside for a moment, and let us take a trip back in time. A trip that will show us the clues of how we got to where we are, and how through the pages of time this has moved and shaped our world. What is happening right now on our planet is this. We are presently in a transition stage from one age into another, to a whole new age, a whole new way of doing things. Just as we went from the hunter-gatherer into the agricultural age, and just as we went from the agricultural age into the industrial age, we are now moving into what is being called the information age, or the technical age, the computer age, or the space age. No matter what we call it, it's a whole new way of doing things. As we can see, looking back in the past, just as we were leaving the agricultural age into the industrial age, we moved through the Industrial Revolution. This is Gumshoe's favorite time. For some reason, he always seems to be most interested in this time and gets stuck there sometimes. Keep going, Gumshoe, past the agricultural age, to the time of the hunter and gatherer. That's right, Watson. You're on the right track. Keep going. No, not so far. Not quite so far. That's the age of the dinosaurs. Come back a bit. There. Right there. The moment in time when our ancestors climbed down from the trees, moved out of the forests and the jungles, and took that giant leap in consciousness. From the animal stage of existence to the human stage. Us. Humanity was born at that moment. Here is where the consciousness of life first took its giant leap forward in consciousness, and we were born. And here we find the first clue as to why religion and science seem to be at odds with each other, and why each of the religions seem to. But the problem wasn't then, in that age. No. The problem is now, in this age, and for the last 300 years. The refusal of religionists to accept the fact of evolution is almost exactly the same thing that happened 400 years ago when religionists would not accept Galileo's assertion that the Earth was not the center of the universe. For his trouble, Galileo was locked up under house arrest for the rest of his life. The problem was, he was right. He was absolutely right. And here we see the second clue to the dispute between science and religion. Not only was Earth not the center of the universe, but it wasn't even the center of the solar system. But here, the big divide began as a result of this event. And religionists began to look like superstitious fools. Today, the same thing has happened with the theory of evolution. But let's leave that alone for a moment. And let's begin to look at the magnificence of this moment. The moment that our mud ball in space had life breathed into it, and after 900 million years of evolution, for the first time on this planet, life crossed a consciousness boundary and began to ask the big questions of life. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why are we here? What is this? What does this mean? What is this all about? What must I do? These were primeval questions asked in a primeval mind. But for the very first time, life, conscious life, began to ask these questions, began to search for answers. Something within the human consciousness that was very different from the animal consciousness began to move us forward and call us to a higher destiny. And with that, the conscious animal mind crossed this threshold. A threshold that would move us forward in the quest for knowledge and for information and for answers to the many thousands and thousands of questions that we had and that we didn't even know we had. About how it all began. Why? For what purpose? What was the meaning and the purpose of life? As our numbers grew, we began to form family units, tribes, clans, and eventually into kingdoms and nations and countries. And as these questions became more and more pressing, primitive religion rose up in order to answer these questions. The struggle for life at that time was so painful that some primitive tribes would howl and lament over each new sunrise. Primitive man constantly asked, "Who is tormenting me?" Not finding a material source for his miseries, he settled upon a spirit environment, a spiritual explanation. And so was these early primitive religions born of the fear of the mysterious, the awe of the unseen, and the dread of the unknown. Nature fear thus became a factor in the struggle for existence, first because of chance, and then because of mystery. They developed elaborate rituals to appease the spirit world, the world that intuition told them existed as an invisible realm inhabited by spirits and then ghosts. And soon these spirits or ghosts began to become involved in everything and enter into inanimate objects. As this arose, fetishes, magical charms, magic rocks appeared. Because primitive man always wanted to make anything extraordinary into a fetish. The first fetishes were eye-catching rocks, pebbles. These became the sacred stones because they stood out. Later, Moses would make an attempt to control this fetish worship among the Hebrews, and he carefully directed that they should make no sort of image that might become consecrated as a fetish. And then he gave them the 10 Commandments, written in stone. But as these rituals of magic and miracles and these fetishes and magic charms became more and more complex, it inevitably became the priest or the shaman or the magician who dominated these events. And eventually they took over the whole process. Whoever had the best answers to explain nature and the difficulties of nature and the universe as they recognized it, that person got the job. There was heavy competition for these positions, as they slowly became positions of power and influence And eventually religion entered a whole new phase, a whole new stage of existence, where gradually it became second-hand and controlled by the tribal magician, the medicine man, or the shaman. The priest would intervene on the religionist's behalf. Eventually they became the objects of worship themselves. At first they were just the intermediary between the gods and the people, but slowly they evolved into this idea that they were the god. At first, as the intermediary between the gods and the people. But slowly this evolved into the god of the clan or the tribe or the community, as we saw with the Caesars in ancient Rome. Thus we see evolutionary religions were born from this very simple but powerful quest to know and to understand. This cosmic curiosity that surges through the human mind, even now. But back then they had no word for this, because it was just part of everyday thought and action, and it needed no word. It wasn't religious, it was living. It was the reality of the universe. But very quickly, this was superseded by the greatest of all control devices: fear. The fear that comes when confronted with the unknown, the unexplainable, the incomprehensible. And slowly the medicine man and the shaman and the priest rose up with answers to these questions, to perform the rituals and the incantations, to conduct the worship ceremonies, and to develop the tribal rules and the regulations with their professed powers. Powers to inflict disease, death, to cure all manner of disorder, to make known distance and future events, to cause hail, rain, even tempests, to come for either good or for ill, to call upon the dead and consult with them on every matter concerning the hidden matters. They put on the form of the tiger or the wolf or the bear to handle every kind of danger. The shaman represented a critical step in the emergence of organized religion and community leadership. For our primitive ancestors, life was a struggle for existence, a struggle for survival. This was very much a life red in tooth and claw, and very much depended upon the chance happenings of the day. This grew into so-called luck, which formed out of the common circumstances of the day, both good luck and bad luck, that humans created out of these chance or commonplace happenings of the day-to-day activities, because they lived lives of peril in which chance played such an important role. The constant dread of the unknown or the unseen calamity hung over these savages as a cloud of despair, which effectively eclipsed every pleasure they had. They lived in constant dread of doing something that would bring bad luck upon them. These superstitious savages always feared a run of good luck. They viewed such good fortune as a certain harbinger of calamity that was just ahead. Soon, everything became an object of worship, and the prominent medicine man or shaman began to make the rules. They made the rules for the people, not by the people. And the people were made to listen and to follow all of the thou shalt nots and to do whatever they were told. It was these shamans and these holy men who developed the rules, the doctrines, and the dogmas that determined the day-to-day life of every person under their influence. They made sure that all of these rules helped them to accumulate power and the wealth of the tribe or the clan. And they made sure that the natural resources and the riches and the wealth would drift upwards to the elite of the tribe. They formed alliances and pacts with the military men and the chiefs, and together they became the kleptocrats. They accumulated the wealth and the power, and they formed these kleptocracies that helped them to stay in power. And they did this through fear, and through magic, and through primitive superstition and religion. They came up with the magic charts and their holy circles and their